Well, hello YouTubers, and welcome back to the sacrificial channel and another episode in the woodworking series. Today we're going to be facing a challenge in work holding. We're making some small medallions like this, or little wheels for lack of a better term, out of a piece of wood like this. Now this is a piece of olive wood. It's relatively hard, and we're going to be using a hole saw to do it. Now granted, this is going to be a carbide tipped hole saw, but nevertheless, the working principle of the tool is the same as a regular hole saw that you all know and love. Here's a picture of one right here. And then, of course, here's the hole saw that we're going to be using right here. The reason we're using a carbide tipped is we need a fairly clean cut on the around the outer perimeter of the wheel, and because these are going to be made into keychains, and so the cut quality has to be pretty clean. There's no way you can really sand these round, and of course they have to be round. If you were to stick them on like this sander right here, excuse me. There's really no good way of getting them around. Now some of these came loose during the cutting process, or at the end of the cutting process I should say, and have a small burr on the edge of them, and so we're going to wind up taking them to the sander here just to take that burr off, and then later put a small bevel on the outer perimeter of the piece. So anyway, this is going to be kind of a unique challenge in the sense that if you were to hold this in the vise, you're going to end up with a piece left over, and you can't really saw into it, with it being in the vise on parallels or something like that, because then your hole saw would wind up cutting into the vise. It's just kind of a pickle all the way around, because we're trying to maximize the amount of yield that we're going to get out of this piece of wood. This stuff is really, really expensive. It's hideously expensive. And so we're trying to maximize the amount of medallions that we can get out of it. And so gluing it down is not an option, because then you won't get them off the parent board without doing damage to the final product. And so the solution that I kind of came up with is using double-sided tape. Now I've got some stuff they were throwing out here. This was just a piece, a leftover piece that was just too short to continue in production, and this one here is a sort that we phased out. But we're going to give them both a try and see how they both work in contrast, and go to the one that works better. This one down here is supposedly a little stronger adhesive, so maybe this one will work better. We shall see. So anyway, let me bring you around the camera. Let me bring the camera around here and show you up close of the dilemma that we're faced with. So here's the project at hand. Like I said, we've got these little discs, these medallions that we're making right here. Let me bring it up close here to the camera. Let's see if it'll focus. And like I said, we need a clean cut out here on the perimeter of the disc, and then later on it gets a bevel on the corner. Here's our rawling here, and this is the hole saw that we're going to be using. Now I did modify this a little bit, and then I put a bigger hole in here in order to be able to punch out the discs when they do end up getting stuck inside the hole saw. It happens on occasion where the double-sided tape doesn't stick for whatever reason. It's usually because of some warpage of the workpiece against the MDF motherboard that I'm using here in order to fasten the work to the table. Now we're all familiar with this type of hole saw. That's one of these here, these Lennox. Get back in frame, dummy. One of these Lennox bimetal saws. These work to a degree, but the cut that they deliver isn't as clean as it needs to be for this particular project. So that's why we're going to this carbide tipped table or hole saw. And then, like I say, I had to modify it in order to be able to stick a finger or a larger tool in there in order to eject the disc when they do finally, you know, on occasion end up getting stuck in there and then won't stick to the table or to the board, and then they're left with a burr. And so we're going to end up using this carbide tipped in order to, you know, cut these out, and we're going to use a staggered pattern. That, of course, again, is the dilemma of the material at hand. It's not a width to where it's optimized for the tool. So we're going to end up taking one cut. We're going to run it to the maximum allowable edge where we're still in the material, but yet going right to the edge of the usable material, and essentially ejecting the chips out the side, but still creating a round to where we're not totally outside the edged part of the board. And then we're going to stagger it back and forth and try to optimize the recovery of the material. Then we have some interesting grain features here. We're going to try to optimize some of those so that they're incorporated into the pieces. But the first criterion is being able to get as much material as we can out of this, out of this material, out of this particular board. So what we're going to end up doing, and I'll run through a complete bar of this in real time in this video for demonstration purposes, so that you kind of get an idea of what we're talking about, how long it's going to take. I might speed up the footage, I don't know, just depends on, you know, how froggy I'm feeling in post-production. If the video threatens to get too long, then we'll probably speed something up, but other than that, it's probably just going to be a real-time demonstration. Now, the next step, of course, is to lay down our sticky tape on this. This is just a scrap piece of MDF that I picked out of the scrap bin. We're just going to lay down, you know, enough sticky tape on it to get 3 or 4, however many we can get on here. Let's see. Without interfering with one another. There's 3. Well, yeah, it looks like it's going to be 3 because 4 is going to be a little bit. Yeah, see, 4, almost enough for 4, but not quite. For 4, we'd need a little bit wider surface area, because if I bump them up against each other, then of course, yeah, it'll work. However, the problem then becomes you're getting overreach, you know, from one board to the other as you're trying to optimize. And so we're trying to stay out of cutting into the other board as much as we can. Granted, you know, if it falls into the scrap piece, it really doesn't matter. But there again, we're doing this on the fly. We're doing this, you know, trying to keep a little bit of production pace going without having to watch too much for little boo-boos along the way. So we're just going to minimize our margin of error as much as we can. Now, the one thing we got to look for too is these parts aren't perfectly flat, and so when you know, hit the corners, you know, they have a tendency to kind of pitter patter, and you also got to watch for the sanded part of it. This, for example, has a little bit of a hollow, so if I were to glue this down or tape this down this way, the parts in the middle will probably not stick to the substrate. This part, the ones on the ends might you know, come loose as we're cutting. So we'll just kind of have to play it by ear and see how it goes. One option would be to double up on the tape on the ends Might do that, just depends on how much it ends up being. So we'll kind of play with that for a little bit and see how it goes. So here's some footage of gluing the boards to the substrate. Now I recorded this on a different camera, so the quality isn't going to be quite as good as what's in, but I hope you get the idea. Well, here we've got our substrate board bolted down to the table of the Bridgeport. You know, you don't have to use a Bridgeport. You can do this on a drill press. It's just you're going to have to get creative in how you fasten the board to the table, and then, of course, move it along the XY axis in order to access the next, locality to cut your workpiece. Now, as you can see here, let me zoom in just a twitch. What we've done here is we've aligned the cutter along the edge here to where the teeth are outside the edge of the board. Same thing here on the very end of it. So that way we're maximizing our material to the fullest extent possible. And then we'll just crank the table in and over and go from the next one. Like I said, we're going to do this one probably in real time. I'm going to have to back the camera up just a smidge here once we get going, because I'm going to run out of room. I've got the tripod up a little too close to the table here, and I'll probably run into it, as the work advances along the front here. So this next portion of the video is, of course, a real-time demonstration in how fast this is going to go, and you'll get to see as well whether or not we'll have to employ the hole here to press a piece out if it, if it does come loose to the sticky tape on the table. So let me back the camera up here. In order to get one of these out, if they do end up sticking, is one of these hook wrenches here. All we do is just stick it in the hole, pry up, and pop the thing out. Now the cutter's set at 1500 RPM. We want a fairly good size, a fairly high speed in cutting, especially in wood. You need a higher speed in wood. 1500 seems to be a pretty good speed for this. That way the tool pressure is also minimized. The slower you go, the higher the tool pressure is going to be. So that way, just be aware of the fact that, if your work pieces are always coming loose, bump your RPMs up, and you might be coming into the next range of speeds or tool pressures that allow the adhesive to do its work. So let's go from here. Well, there you go. So there's 7 pieces out of each one. You can see what time it took there in the minute counter in the bottom of the video. So that's, you know, the real-time amount that you need to cut. You know, and this turned out quite well, actually. I was expecting 1 or 2, especially up here in the upper reaches where the thing was kind of bananaed a little bit. What I ended up doing is putting a chunk of steel on. You know, I stacked them up and then put a 100-pound piece of iron on top of it and weighted it down for a little bit and let them set so where they could form and the adhesive can bond a little bit. Getting these off of here is going to be a little bit of a challenge, but nevertheless, at least the adhesive did its job and the pieces stayed on the substrate quite well. So that turned out better than what I had hoped for. There's no guarantees. One of the other ones may or may not come loose. It just depends. We shall see. But anyway, that's kind of how this works. Well, YouTubers, that's a wrap for this little project of work holding and making poker chips. I hope you were able to glean a little useful information out of this. Like I said, holding these things down was a real bear because you can't screw them down. Can't have a hole in them. There's, you know, a lot of not logistical but tooling problems that had to be overcome, and so this was probably about the best way of doing it. If I were to have glued it down, you know, with a piece of newspaper in between, you know, then you're introducing another step into the process. This way, all I have to do is just scrape off the remnants of tape on the bottom of the disc here, and we're good to go. So that's how that kind of shakes out. If you guys have any thoughts, comments, critiques, ideas, or suggestions, by all means, put them in the comment section below. You know, if you have a different way of handling this, by all means, share it with the other folks watching the video. I'm sure that you know, somebody out there would be interested, because you know, this is the only way I found that I could really make it work without too much trouble. But like I say, if you have a better method of doing it, by all means, share it with the folks and the viewers in the comment section below. So with that, I thank you for stopping by. For those of you who are new to the channel, please don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell. For those of you who would like to support the channel in a meaningful way, by all means, please let the ads play. Just grab yourself a cup of coffee or a soda pop or whatever beverage of choice that you might have as you're watching a video and enjoying it. You know, that ad, I mean, I do the same thing with the ads. I just let them play and you know, in support of other channels, and then go grab myself a cup of coffee or a beer or whatever, and then I sit down and enjoy the video, you know, because you can always rewind it if it happens to start up before you're done getting your you know, beverage of choice, and it helps out the channel immensely. There's a few goals that I have that I'm trying to accomplish, and this is one way I thought that might help in getting that done. So with that, thanks for stopping by and supporting the channel, and we'll hope to see you all again soon.